This is Jerome. I'd like to talk with my friends at Lead Magazine for a few minutes today about how to make the most of your church volunteers. For someone to volunteer their time, energy, and creativity is an act of profound trust. So we as leaders need to be worthy of that trust. The opportunities, as you might expect, for botching this are many, and the cost of botching it is high. No one needs another story of how they got hurt in the church, right? So investing in your volunteers with heart and skill has the potential to build a strength of community that can withstand many storms. And this is the big picture. And hear me on this. It's not about getting stuff done as much as it is about building a healthy community. That's the big takeaway that I want to leave with you today. So now let's unpack the heart and skill of managing volunteers by looking at the big 7. Number 1, invite people to serve based on their talent and passion, not based on your need. It's a classic pitfall, especially in small churches that are often scrambling to cover essential roles around the weekend service. I get it, I've been there, and there may be an exception to this rule, but let it be the exception. Instead of just responding to crisis and need, build into your onboarding of new church members a way to explore their talents and passions. This is part of discipleship, actually. You're sowing into their lives the power of purpose, whether they stay in your church for 20 years or 2 months. The talent and passion, they need to match, of course. Just because someone wants to sing on stage doesn't necessarily mean they have the ability to sing on stage. Number 2, use volunteering to reinforce church values by always explaining the why. Why do we greet people at the door? Why do we worship the way we do? Why do we do this or that with children's church? Why do we follow up with visitors the way we do? Why do we handle money the way we do? Why do we do small groups this way? Why do we partner with local ministries? Do not assume that people understand why. This is not because they're not smart, but it's because they carry their own assumptions and perspectives, and those can be valuable. But we're forming a culture here, and remember, culture management is the first job of leaders. Culture establishes identity and purpose in the community, and this is a particularly organic way to reinforce what's important in your church. Number 3, in the volunteering partnership, spell out the objective and non-negotiables with precision, then release people into their creativity, their innovation, their collaboration. This is an important point. Sometimes volunteers are managed too loosely and sometimes too tightly. Here's how to thread the needle. Tell folks the exact objective for the ministry they're considering and the primary functions of that ministry. It's different than the why. Well, it's sort of a sub-why. So, for example, we greet people when they arrive for services because we want them to experience church as personal and welcoming, not just a production. Okay, that matters. And we smile because love is contagious. And we look people in the eye because the eye is the window of the soul. So this is why what they're doing matters. And there may be some other elements that you need to manage tightly, things that are non-negotiable. Maybe it's when they arrive and how long they stay there. But go as sparse on the non-negotiables as possible, and then invite their creativity. Stuff like this. What do you say in greeting with folks? Do you shake hands, or do you hug, or you just speak? Do you hold the door? Where do you stand? Do you have umbrellas? Do you help with their children? Do you direct people to the information table? The more input that volunteers have on the how, the more vested they will be in the experience. You may have to standardize certain elements, but don't let it get stagnant. Keep reinventing the how and let them help. Number 4, communicate, encourage, and hold volunteers accountable. This is your job. It's nobody else's. These are 3 things you do not want to delegate. Whoever's managing the ministry needs to do these 3 functions. And when I say communicate, I really mean over-communicate. Use email, text, church app, phone, whatever. But let your teams know what to expect and what's expected of them lots of times and regularly. Then encourage and affirm every chance you get. Watch how your volunteers are doing it. This is the best chance for on-the-job training. Hey, I saw you doing it this way. Here's how it could be done a little better. Or here's what I've seen that's been particularly effective. What do you think about that? And then, of course, expressing your appreciation for a job well done. Finally, on this point, just because volunteers aren't being paid doesn't mean that there's no accountability. Their service to others is a privilege, and it matters. So if they don't show up without notice, for example, they deserve to get a phone call to gently inquire about that every time. So remember, managing volunteers, it's a means of discipleship. So even when it's time for some loving correction, that is part of people's formation as a person. And that's going to last long before or long after this ministry is done for them. And it keeps the vision high for serving with excellence. Number 5. Manage the process more than the product. Now, you're already probably noticing that every point I'm describing here, discerning people's gifts, reinforcing the church values, innovating, communicating, this is all about process, or you could say a system. But it's a system that is relational. And that's what really matters here. It's about caring for people and equipping them in healthy community. If you do that well and you hold them accountable to that, the product will take care of itself. And if you flip that around and you focus all your attention just on getting the product right and use that as your measure of success and neglect the process, it's going to be hit and miss on the things that really matter. It's missing the point that volunteer management is people management. It is love, which takes me to point number 6. Take every opportunity to pastor your volunteers. Volunteer ministry is one of the best environments for pastoral care, and it doesn't take a lot of time and effort to just ask how people are doing and wait for a real answer. To ask questions that communicate you're really interested, and then to follow up on things they've mentioned previously, to pray with people about a need or concern. Don't expect this to happen somewhere else in the church. It might, which is great. But as a church leader, you're more than an organizer or an administrator. You are a pastor. Whether you have the title or not, this is your chance to love on people in a super practical way. My last point here, number 7, I've kind of touched on this before, but always appreciate what people are offering. They don't have to do this, so don't take their time and energy for granted. Even if they've been there for 5 or 10 years, thank them. Mention what they're doing well and why it matters so much. Let them know they're part of a family. You know, people are desperate to belong to something that matters. Let them know you do belong to something that matters. So there you have it. These are my top 7 recommendations for how to make the most of your volunteers. Grace and peace to you, my friends. This is Jerome. Talk soon.